Hey, this is Kez.
And Violet.
And this is Nightmares at Midnight. Hi, everybody. Yep, you heard that right. Violet's on another episode with me, and we're going to be talking about the Red Dwarf from Detroit. But before we get to that, let's talk about what we're watching. So this last week, Violet and I have been watching a lot of Christmas or holiday movies, trying to get into the Christmas spirit. Normally, I really enjoy decorating for the holidays, but this season I'm really struggling to get into it. So we've been watching a lot of the movies to try to catch back up.
We watched both of the Grinch movies, the newest one, the more animation version, and then the realistic version that came out when my mom was a kid. I don't know what age she said it was around when she was a teenager. Anyways.
I think it was like 13 or 14 when not the cartoon, the original cartoon obviously, but the live action one.
That is something we used to watch like every Christmas, like the Christmas movie we used to watch, which was
Which Christmas movie?
The
Christmas Story.
With
Ralphie.
Yeah, with Ralphie.
Yeah.
We're gonna shoot your eye out.
Yeah. Well, that one I watched as a kid with Gunkin all the time.
Yeah, me.
Every year, like that was a tradition that it was like we knew it was Christmas time when we started watching that movie.
But then it starts getting old.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Then, what else have we watched?
I Am a Killer, I Am a Stalker on Netflix.
Oh, yep, we've been watching that. That's not really Christmassy, but there's a show on Netflix, the I Am a Stalker one, that it actually interviews people who are in prison for stalking, and same with the I Am a Killer one, where they interview people who were charged with murder, who are on death row. I think those ones are always interesting because they try to get the person who's in prison's story, and then they actually go through like what actually happened, and they talk to witnesses and stuff, and it's interesting how it's totally different than what the person who's convicted has to say sometimes.
Because sometimes they try to be smart and witty and get the people on their side, and then when the victims who went through this start talking, they start either disagreeing, they don't actually talk to each other, and I don't think they say what the victim said to the prisoner.
Well, sometimes they have.
Yeah, sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I think that the people that are interviewing the prisoner have asked questions that are similar.
I finished watching Killer Sally from last week. That was a good one. I mean, if you're into hearing about it, like I mentioned last week, she's a pro bodybuilder who made movies about wrestling, and she shot her then husband, and now she's actually out of prison already for it. But that was an interesting one to watch too. Other than that, that's about all I've been watching this week. I've been trying to get a lot of stuff done. Gonna go into surgery next week, so episodes might be released on a different day.
We are having a good week so far, and we've also, don't forget about Milo Murphy's Law. That's a good one.
Oh, yep, we've been watching that too. That one's on Disney Plus.
Yep, Disney Plus.
About Milo Murphy.
The Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law, that if anything could go wrong, it will. It's by the same people that made
Phineas and Ferb.
Thank you. I was struggling to think of what the show was called.
Because in the episodes of Milo Murphy and Phineas and Ferb, they have them mixed into one. They both are.
Oh yeah, they do have them crossover sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you see
do you remember that one episode where they talk about Perry?
Yeah, Perry the Platypus.
Mm-hmm. He's my favorite character in Phineas and Ferb.
Me too. So with Milo Murphy's Law, in the first episode, what got me hooked is how within at least 4-ish minutes, there was already a disaster starting to happen.
Right away. And the theme song is catchy. It's always stuck in my head. So let's see. Other updates. Here in Alaska, it sleeted a couple days ago, and with my husband being gone for a while, Violet and I had to put up the Christmas decorations outside by ourselves, and I should have looked at the weather, but we decided to put it up when it was sleeting and raining and cold, and we just wanted to get them up before it snowed a bunch. And then it turns around the next day and was like 40 and sunshine, so I could have waited and not done it in the rain. But
she thought she was gonna die.
I did think I was gonna die. I have
Even
an extreme.
though I was there, she thought she was gonna die.
I have an extreme fear of heights, and getting up on that ladder is terrifying for me. So I am a strong, independent woman for getting up there on that ladder and putting these lights up so my husband doesn't have to when there's feet of snow when he comes home. So as far as snow, we really don't have a whole lot of snow right now. It's like a dusting, really, but the sun is not coming up right now until, right now we're recording this, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sun is just starting to come up over the mountains. And then it sets like around 3:30, 4 o'clock, it's already setting. As it gets closer to Christmas time, the dark just continues to stay, and we have less sunshine. And my birthday is the winter solstice, or December 21st, and that day there's like no sun at all that day.
Kind of depressing.
It kind of is, but
it's also kind of cool because you got your birthday
on the solstice.
Yeah,
I like that. And I've always been more of a winter person than a summer person.
True.
I thrive in Alaska because it's cold. I can't even imagine living somewhere in like Arizona or Texas where it's hot and they have snakes
and scorpions and spiders and all those little creepy crawlies.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to this TikToker we've been...
He's called David.
Is it David?
Yeah,
I was looking it up to see.
He does these videos. It's kind of like these informational TikToks. Why he does this.
Oh, it's David Oren. That's it. So if you want to see these videos, check out David Oren. He's on TikTok. And like Violet was saying, he does these like educational...
stunts.
Not really stunts. He like just walks up and grabs these snakes and like shows them to the camera, and they're like biting him and wrapping all around him and stuff. And
one bit in his face.
Yeah.
It was hilarious a little bit.
And he's telling you like what kind of snake it is and whether it's poisonous or not. So I'm not a snake person at all, but it is kind of interesting to watch somebody else do it so I don't have to. But anyways, learning about them, I would not want to live somewhere that's hot. This is why I live where it's so cold, is because then poisonous things can't get me. Like the worst thing we have here is bear and moose. I don't know if you guys know about moose either, that how big they actually are. When we first moved up here,
there were moose outside of our house and they were licking our cars.
Yeah, they were licking the salt off the trucks. They're huge animals, and unfortunately up here they get hit a lot by cars because unlike deer, they don't have reflective eyes like deer do, so you don't really see that the moose are there until it's too late. And these things are so big that they just do so much damage to cars. And a terrifying fun fact for you is that moose can swim. So I can only imagine when I'm out in my boat and a moose decides to swim by, I would not be out in that boat much longer. I think I'm just afraid when we take out the dogs and stuff and it's so dark that we won't see the moose and then something's going to happen to our dogs.
Or us.
Or us, yeah, I guess, because these things are huge and can move fast. Kayla's Kitchen and Closet. Downtown Park Falls is your local one-stop shop. Stop by the kitchen, open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., where they are serving up your favorites for breakfast and lunch, along with their always tasty lattes, frappes, desserts, and much more. The Closet is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. They have everything you need from lounging at home to attending a special event, including jewelry, shoes, and accessories. Find the perfect outfit, a tasty treat, or just the right gift at Kayla's Kitchen and Closet, downtown Park Falls, or online at kaylaskitchenandcloset.com. Kayla and the crew are always there for you. Okay,
let's open our dogs.
We went off on a tangent about Alaska, but let's get back to the topic. This week we are doing the Red Dwarf of Detroit. So Detroit is on the southeastern side of Michigan, right next to Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. If you're coming from Rhinelander, it's about a 9-hour drive, and if you're coming from Chicago, it's about 4 hours. The description are kind of vague, but most run the common theme of a small man or childlike figure with fur boots that can be either red or black. It has rotten teeth that are pointy and really intense red eyes. Reports have stated that the Nain Rogue sounds similar to that of a crow cawing, usually accompanied with a maniacal grin. Me, as a person who is terrified of birds, this sounds horrible. I can't even imagine having to deal with that. So I'm going to read a book that my husband has that's been on our shelf for quite a while. He was actually the one that suggested The Red Dwarf of Detroit to me. Badass, The Birth of a Legend by Ben Thompson, chapter 38 on page 333. That has a little blip about the Red Dwarf of Detroit. So I'm just going to go ahead and read that. It talks about the history of where the Red Dwarf came from. The creature approached nearer. It was neither Indian nor white man, though perchance the worst embodiment of both, a being apparently half human, half gnome, short of stature, very red in the face, and with a blazing eye whose horrible stare, instead of burning, turned the blood in one's veins to ice. The apparition was enwrapped from head to foot in a blanket that I took to be crimson, as well as I could see it in the moonlight, and his diabolical grin displayed a wide mouth and sharp fang-like teeth. That is an alleged account of the dwarf given by a member of Cadillac's traveling party. I'm going to explain about Cadillac here in just a minute. A small group of daring French explorers led by the intrepid Antoine Laume du Lamoth Serre de Cadillac. Bear with me, I am not French by any means.
Neither am I.
The first white settler brave enough to penetrate this previously uncharted territory quietly made their way through the dark woods outside the newly founded settlement of Detroit. The only sounds wafting through the night air were the eerie whipping of the frigid wind, the gentle rustling of the leaves, and the quiet splashing of the Detroit River running just beyond the small dirt path. The fog was thicker than a chunky New England clam chowder, yum, denser than usual, and so oppressively heavy that the men pushing through it felt like they were marching through a hyperactive fog machine while being constantly shot in the face from close range with a fire extinguisher. What a description. The small group of hardy explorers were on edge even before the fog rolled in. No one vocalized their uneasiness. They had reputations to uphold, after all, but all of them had heard the creepy-ass tales passed down from the native Ottawa Indians. Oh, by the way, in this description, there is swearing. Pre-warning. Freaky references to a super pissed-off demon man who haunted the woods tirelessly looking for his next victim. These men had all swallowed their fear as the cryptic old fortune teller in the foreboding Castle St. Louis had croaked out the grim future that awaited Cadillac in this vast, uncharted wildland. How his fortunes would be great, only to be snatched away like the last bratwurst at a tailgate party. Just then, a small, almost imperceptible sound from the road ahead caused the edgy Frenchmen to halt in their tracks. Down the path, slowly, silently, an ominous 3-foot-tall apparition made its way through the fog toward the men. As it drew nearer, the grim features of this demonic being slowly came into focus. Its skin was bright red, and the strange goblin, bundled in a red cloak, was supporting an overdeveloped set of canine teeth in an attitude that could be best described as surly as hell.
It sounds like they found the rogue.
Yeah.
They also, I hope they have weapons. We never know if this thing's an ankle biter.
Before anyone could make a move, the creature sprang into action like a crazy jack-in-the-box with a 2x4 and an intense hatred of everything in the universe. The creature whipped out a small, heavy hickory stick, cackled like a creepy asshole, ran up and started viciously clocking Cadillac in the knees really hard, repeatedly. Cadillac jumped back, shocked and horrified at this overgrown underpants gnome smacking him ruthlessly in the patella and presumably calling him I'm not using that word. The Frenchman instinctively drew his sword and swiped at the angry little monster, but it deftly avoided him and continued punishing his kneecaps with its instrument of blunt force wooden viciousness.
So it sounds like this thing is an old man.
It kind of does.
It makes me think of this old man just whacking these little whippersnappers in the knee.
After a brief, painful battle that could only be described as retarded, and I quote, that was in there, the creature suddenly hopped back, leered menacingly at the Frenchman, cackled once more, and disappeared back into the fog. Less than a week later, Cadillac was recalled by order of the king to stand trial for shady business practices he'd been perpetrating for the last couple of years. He would wind up stripped of his wealth, publicly disgraced, and rotting in the misery of the Bastille. I don't know what that is.
I don't know either. It doesn't sound familiar.
It sounds like maybe a jail. A few years later, his town, Detroit, would fall into the hands of the British, who would, in turn, lose it to the Americans almost immediately, thereby cementing Cadillac's complete failure as a human being. But Cadillac's tragically hilarious story is just the beginning of Detroit's problems. True, the mayor's city is a tough blue-collar metropolis full of squid-chucking survivors who have earned a reputation for being about as durable as they come. From the hard hat-wearing machinists putting in backbreaking 9-to-5s in auto plants to Ted friggin' Nugent pioneering the art of hunting wildlife by chasing them through the woods on foot with an electric guitar that doubles as a chainsaw. There's a lot of crazy crap happening around Motown. The innate toughness of the 313 doesn't, however, nullify the common perception among Americans that the city of Detroit pretty much sucks balls. That was in here.
That's kind of funny.
This guy. Sure, this may be verifying degrees of untrue, but even the most devoted Red Wings fans has to admit that it's really not a good sign when the first white settler of your city ends up getting Tanya Hardinged by a demon man and spending the rest of his life sweating and going completely straitjacket insane in a French penitentiary. So yes, the Bastille is a penitentiary. There's an admittedly less than wildly held belief, however, that Detroit's various woes aren't the product of poor luck or a football program that hasn't been watchable since the days of Barry Sanders. They claim the city is cursed, tormented by a demon spirit that was present at the inception of Fort Detroit, and which still roams the streets and neighborhoods of the city to this day, the infamous Nain Rouge, or the Red Dwarf of Detroit. I'm not going to lie to you, this thing kind of scares me. The idea that there's some weird-as-hell little monster running around the forest like a cross between Rurik Davis from Leprechaun series and Hacksaw Jim Duggan is unsettling at best. I have no idea why this eerily happy creature is out in the woods beating Frenchmen with sticks, but I don't like it. But, as I said, Cadillac's epically bruised legs were the least of the trouble caused by this Red Dwarf. The Red Dwarf once again haunted southeastern Michigan during 1763 rebellion of Chief Pontiac, a badass Native American warrior whose name I pretty much only mention because I think it's kind of awesome that the first two people to see Detroit's personal arch nemesis now have automobile companies named after them. One night, during the campaign, 2 British infantrymen standing watch in their camp allegedly saw this cackling maniac running around doing cartwheels in the woods like a dumbass. The Brits chased it away by shooting at it, but the next day the entire company, 58 battle-hardened soldiers, were ambushed by Pontiac's warriors and massacred in a slaughter that was said to have turned a nearby river red with the blood of the slain. Known as the Harbinger of Doom, the infamous Red Dwarf continued being a total jerk throughout the history of the cursed city. There's an account in 1884 of a woman being attacked by this thing. She mentioned being particularly unsettled by its lascivious leer. I'm assuming that's like its laugh. And some of the city's earliest settlers complained about a small man with bright red skin running around the woods offering to baptize people just to screw with their heads. In 1805, the Red Dwarf was seen again, this time running around through the streets of the city just hours before a devastating fire melted 200 houses and torched every structure in Detroit except for one well-made stone building. With this info in mind, you can almost understand the actions of American General William Hull during the War of 1812, when Fort Detroit was surrounded and besieged by the British. Hull saw the Red Dwarf running through the woods outside the city walls and immediately surrendered his garrison despite having strict orders to defend it at all costs. While this calculated maneuver may have averted some kind of thermonuclear disaster, the curse of the angry gnome still grasped General Hull in its tiny fist. The disgraced commander was subsequently court-martialed for his actions and sentenced to death by firing squad, and is now remembered as a coward and an incompetent numbnuts. Even to this day, the name Rouge, I think it's rouge like red, continually appears just before times of groin-crushing hardship, arguably in a pretty badass effort to prematurely taunt Detroiters immediately before they get their asses kicked by some kind of soul-obliterating misery. In 1967, it was seen running down 12th Street doing backflips just hours before a series of brutal race riots that left 43 people dead and hundreds more injured and hospitalized. It gave the finger to a pair of Detroit Power Company workers just 24 hours before the worst ice storm in history blasted the city, leaving 16 people dead and 400,000 homes without electricity for days. In 1996, two super drunk Detroiters apparently saw it breaking into a car, and in 2008, the Lions completed their decade-long death spiral of futility and became the first 0-16 team in NFL history. This is all the work of the Dwarf and his leering angst of evil. Also, Matt Millen, who isn't particularly red or goblin-like, may have at some point had a never-mentioned meeting with the beast that cursed him throughout his days in Detroit. As a side note, at the end of this little chapter, it says leprechauns are pretty well known for their pots of gold and lucky charms and whatnot, but their drunken cousins, the Cluricons, are a lot less about playing hopscotch with rainbows and a lot more about pounding whiskey, swearing, dancing around mushroom circles, and swinging Jameson bottles around during out-of-control pub brawls. These surly cons wear red instead of green so as not to be mistaken for their douchey bros, drink a ton of wine, and get DUIs for drunkenly riding around on the backs of dogs or sheep while well above the legal limit. If you're nice to them and leave them little plates of booze like alcoholic Santas, the Cluricons are said to protect your wine cellar from intruders, keep your booze casks from leaking, and sing badass old Irish folk songs in your basement all night long. If you piss them off, however, they'll spoil all your wine, trash your basement, and upper deck every toilet in your house before storming out and never returning. So that was just the chapter from Badass, The Birth of a Legend by Ben Thompson, which I happen to have on my shelf. So kind of going back to review a little bit. Cadillac, not the only person to have suffered at the hand of Nain Rogue. Throughout Detroit's history, the Nain Rogue has appeared to precede numerous disasters, as mentioned, with the British soldiers who were massacred by the Native American Pontiac tribe. After the massacre, the Detroit River literally ran red with blood for days. However, the most chilling detail in this story is that the Nain Rogue was reported dancing by the Detroit riverside the night before the massacre. That's scary.
Yeah, it's a curse.
In French folklore, there are traditions of small beings like this called lutins. Europe is rich with tales of sprites and hobgoblins, elves, leprechauns, and countless other small and occasionally rascally supernatural beings. It is thought that the French brought the idea of lutins with them to the New World. According to the 1892 issue of the Journal of American Folklore, quote, in the French-speaking parishes of the province of Quebec, the lutins are considered as mischievous, fun-loving little spirits which may be protecting or annoying household gods or demons according to the treatment that they receive from the inmates of the house where they have chosen to dwell. As far as recent local culture, the Nain Rogue legend has become part of the folklore of the Detroit area. As mentioned, two utility workers claim to have seen the creature just before the 1967 riots, and supposedly it was also seen before the ice storm in 1976. As far as currently, the Detroit Beer Company, a brew pub in downtown Detroit, has its signature brew called a Detroit Dwarf Lager, named in honor of the Nain Rouge. I'm going to mispronounce that the whole time. But it wasn't until the March du Nain Rouge parade began in 2010 that the Red Dwarf became more of a household name. Last year, so 2021, Caliber Comics published Nain Rouge, the Red Legend, which is a graphic novel depiction of the tale. Also in 2015, Woodbury Wine, a distributor and wholesaler of fine wines, and Kindred Vines Import Company, an importer of French and Italian wines, they made and introduced Nain Rouge Red, a French red wine blend named after the dwarf. The city in springtime has the March du Nain. In 2023, it's Sunday, March 26th, and Detroit holds a costumed community parade in which the creature is traditionally chased out of the city. Although the revival parade stays entirely within the Midtown Cass Corridor neighborhood, at the conclusion of the parade, a representation of the dwarf is destroyed, thus, quote, banishing the evil spirit from the city for another year. According to tradition, parade participants and spectators are encouraged to wear different costumes each year, so that when the Nain Rouge next returns, he will not recognize the person who chased him from the city limits and will not be able to seek vengeance.
The 2011 event featured a parade followed by the banishment and a party in Cass Park, drawing hundreds of guests. Organizations calling themselves, quote, the Friends of Nain Rouge and, quote, We Are Nain Rouge, have lighthearted protested the banishment parade, arguing that the Nain Rouge is not to blame for the city's ills, and that, considering Detroit's population loss, no one should be banished from the city, particularly the ones who have been there the longest. Both groups also worked toward making the event a celebration of Detroit's folklore agent guardian. The banishment parade has also taken place in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. Recent parades have also drawn an estimated 5,000 people each year.
As far as books, there's quite a few that are. Some of them are Legends of La Detroit by Marie Caroline Watson Hamlin. There's one, 5 of the Weirdest Monsters from the World of Lore, Monstrous Creatures. There's a short story, it's like 3 pages long, that's The Curse of the Nain Rouge, The Legend of Detroit's Red Devil, and it's written and illustrated by Michelle Nunley. And then there's the book that I read from, The Badass, The Birth of a Legend by Ben Thompson. That last book has different legend, like chapters in it. As far as movies, the only real one that I found was called Devil's Night, Dawn of Nain Rouge. It came out in 2020, so that's probably why I hadn't heard of it, is because, hashtag COVID. As far as merch, though, if you Google merch for this, a lot of different shirts and types come up. Unfortunately, with it being called the Red Dwarf, there's a lot of cross information with space, so I had to narrow the search a little bit differently. There is on printerval.com, there's t-shirts. I found one that I thought was really funny. It's like a hairy red gnome cartoon character. I just thought it kind of reminds me of Hellboy. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie where the character is like a really tall red creature thing. Just picture that, but only like 3 feet tall. So I don't know if that helps describe it at all. Then on Zazzle, there's t-shirts that say like Beware Le Nain Rouge. We got to figure out these ones that aren't in French or different languages so that I can pronounce it easier. I was surprised that this isn't a card in the MetaZoo collection yet. In my past episodes, you guys have heard me talk about MetaZoo and the different characters and cards that they have and the creatures and stuff. I was surprised this one's not in there yet because it feels like every other one that I look up is in there. On the show notes, I did attach the links so that way if you guys want to research or look into this more yourselves, it's there. So yeah, that's about all we have on the Red Dwarf. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in to this episode, and please make sure you're sharing with your friends and family and letting know that my podcast is out. This is the usual spiel that I make sure so that way the word gets out about the podcast. I am working on Podcorn, and I'm also working on
getting a Patreon.
That's it. Thank you.
And
I knew I kept you around or something.
Oh, that's kind of offensive now. But anyways, from my mother forgetting things, we hope you are having a good day or night, and stay safe wherever you are. If your roads are icy, drive safe.
And if you are listening to this at any time, any place, just drop me a message so that way I know that you're out there and listening. Give me some of your comments. I have had some people in person mention to me that they've listened, but I totally would love to hear your feedback on Instagram and on Facebook. Our website is nightmaresatmidnightpodcast.buzzsprout.com. Our Instagram is at Nightmares at Midnight Podcast. Facebook is Nightmares at Midnight Podcast. You can listen on Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Podcast Index, TuneIn Plus Alexa, and Podcast Addict.
We are also willing for you to tell us about your own legend that you've had near where you live, your own kind of like legend.
Yes, if you guys have a local legend wherever you're listening from, please feel free to drop us an email and let us know about it so that way we can talk about that one. Our email is nightmaresatmidnightpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, catch us next time. If you have a business and you'd like to get the word out about your business, feel free to give us an email and we can discuss about getting your ad on the podcast.